Sewing Winch here, and this time we are going to demonstrate how to attach bias tape using the two-step method. And I say two steps, really there's probably a couple more than two, but basically we're going to sew one side on the back and then we'll come around and sew it on the front. Again, I like to start from the back. Some tutorials will tell you to start from the front. This is just what I find most comfortable for me to do, so that I can make sure that my stitches are the prettiest as possible. So, again, our first step here, we're going to line up the bias tape. Now, the bias tape I'm going to hold. So if you have it folded, you want one unfolded edge. This top part here is what's going to go along our raw edge, and leave the rest. The majority of the tape will go against the majority of your fabric. Okay, and I like to start about a 1/2 inch out, and you will see why in a minute here. So here I'm going to, again, I've got my start stop here, so it will do my tie on, and we're just going to sew all the way around. Okay, so we are almost to the end here. I'm just going to finish up this last little bit. And I want it to just butt up. In fact, I'll go ahead and cut my extra here so you can see my stitch is just going to butt up against where I started. And we knot off. Alright. Clip. Okay, so now we have about a 1/2 inch on each side where we started and finished. And here we're just going to make a nice, neat little seam. So they should already be right sides together. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that seam. Now, I like to trim this down to about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. Trim it down pretty far. Alright, just getting rid of our excess threads there. So now you have this nice, neat little seam. Let's see if we get a better look at that. So I have this nice, neat little seam here. We're going to open that seam up, and you can really just finger press. So just press it a few times just to open it up a little bit. Okay. And we want to take our garment and take it to the right side. Again, this is just one of my wrap shirts. Very handy. Very lightweight, very easy garment to construct here. Alright, so now we have it on the right side. You can see my bias tape, and this is single fold bias tape, which means it doesn't have the middle fold. But you can see here, oh, that's another start. Here's our starting point. Okay. So you can see where we started here. We have our seam. Alright. And what we're going to do, I like to press this part up. We're going to clip our strings here. So that seam that we have from the original where we sewed the bias on the back, just kind of finger press that up and fold down So we have the other folded edge of the bias tape should just touch our stitch line. And I'm going to start just a little bit past our original starting place. And I'm going to use a decorative stitch because I really like the decorative stitch with this pattern fabric. Like I said, there's a lot of them, a lot of fabrics, and most of the time I usually use the decorative stitch. Especially when using this method, I like the decorative stitch with it. So I'm going to pick our stitch here. We're going to do a nice little curlicue flowery looking to go with the butterflies. Oops, and our thread's out. Okay, so I got our thread switched out. Since we did run out of thread and I had to switch it anyway, I went ahead and switched to a variegated thread. Variegated threads are a lot of fun to work with, especially when you're doing decorative stitches that have some sort of satin stitch in them, which is what we're doing here. Alright, so I'm just going to get this started here. Okay, and you want to just keep folding all along. And since this is a kind of complicated decorative stitch, even with the time lapse, it's going to take a while. So I'm going to cut out and we'll bring you back when I'm close to the finish. Okay, so here we are at about our last 2 inches. You can see our meeting point is right here. It has our joins. It's going to get a little bumpy there, so you want to make sure that you kind of pull everything flat. Again, you're not forcing anything through the machine. I'm sure we all know that, but you want to try and keep everything just as flat as possible as it works its way through. And now we're back at the beginning, so we're going to tell it to stop. Do our tack off. And there we are. And you can see how fun that variegated stitch is. It's a little bit of different colors. Adds a little bit of depth to your thing, to your item. So that's really it. I'll show the back here, see if we can get a good look at that. And you can see it's just as smooth, which is why some people like to do the front, and then you would have this edge would be your back. The reason why I don't like that is because I'm always worried that I'm going to not catch my front seam. So I prefer to have my last stitching on the front rather than on the back. If you do have your last stitch on the back, then you do end up with a little bit of a smoother seam. So the choice is yours. It's really personal preference. Like I said, I prefer to make sure that I catch my stitches. Really, if you're using a decorative stitch like we did here, it doesn't matter a whole lot as long as your decorative stitch is running both on the bias and off the bias, so you make sure that it catches all the way through. Right, so once again, you can follow us. Follow me on Twitter at Sewing Wench, or we're on Facebook, Milady's Courtier, and you can always check us out on our website, miladies/courtier.com/WordPress.